Hannah gets the extra credit for today. I know. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint where we were, if I can find it. Try share, try PowerPoint. All right. We were asking the question of what determines the slope of the LM curve. This should be interesting to you because it's related to your homework assignment, which is due Sunday night. The question is, what determines the slope of the LM curve? If we start at a point like A and we go to a point like B, notice what's happening. The interest rate is going up, that's the rise, and GDP is going up also, that's the run. So the key questions here are, how much does the interest rate rise and how much does GDP rise? Okay, it's important to remember something here. Remember that the LM curve is an equilibrium condition. It's not a behavioral equation. So when we move off the LM curve, we need to be asking, what does it take to get back into equilibrium? Okay, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. We're just asking the hypothetical question, what does it take to get back into equilibrium? Okay, so let's walk through this. Starting at point A, suppose the interest rate goes from I0 to I1. We're now at point B. At point A, because we were on the LM curve, we knew that money supply equals money demand. At B, GDP has stayed the same, but we're at a higher interest rate. At a higher interest rate, what happens to money demand? Hannah, at a higher interest rate here at B, interest rate goes up, what happens to money demand?
It drops.
It goes down, correct. So at B, since at A, money demand equaled money supply, and at B, money demand is less, it must be true that money demand is now less than money supply. Everybody with me? Anybody have a question? Good. Okay.
One more time.
Was that you, Quinn?
Yes.
Okay. Money supply equals money demand at point A because we're on the LM curve. That's definition of the LM curve. As we go to B, interest rates go up, which means money demand goes down. Because money demand went down, we can conclude that at B, money demand is less than money supply. Okay?
Got it.
Now, to get back on the LM curve, we need to do something to raise money demand back up to what it was originally. The something, the only other tool that we have is for GDP to go up. As GDP rises, what happens to money demand? Mark? As GDP rises, what happens to money demand?
Goes down.
So higher income means lower money demand?
No, it goes up.
Correct. So when we went from A to B, money demand went down. When we go from B to B prime, money demand came back up again. If we're in fact on the LM curve again, it must be true that money supply equals money demand. And so to go from A to B, interest rates went up, taking us out of money market equilibrium. That required an increase in GDP to bring us back into money market equilibrium. All right, any questions? I'm about to tell you why it matters, but just in terms of what we said. Any questions? All right. Now, there's a monster in front of Rachel. Looks like a tiger or something. Okay. So, why does it matter? Here's why. The question we asked was, what determines the slope of the LM curve? The answer has to do with how much does the interest rate rise versus how much does GDP rise? If the interest rate rises a lot and GDP only has to rise a little, then we're going to end up with a pretty steep LM curve here, see? So the question is this distance versus that distance. All right, everybody with me? I haven't pulled the rabbit out of the hat yet. Okay, so what this comes down to is the slope of the LM curve depends on two elasticities. The first one is the interest elasticity of money demand. When we raise the interest rate by a certain amount, how much does money demand fall? That's the interest elasticity of money demand. The second elasticity is the income elasticity of money demand. That's going from B to B prime here. So we have the interest elasticity of money demand and the income elasticity of money demand. That was a chips bag making that nasty noise. Should I repeat that? Everybody got it?
One more time, if you could.
Sure. So the slope here depends on the interest elasticity of money demand and the income elasticity of money demand. Because the interest elasticity tells us when we raise the interest rate, how much does money demand fall? The income elasticity then tells us how much does GDP have to rise to offset that, to bring money demand back up to what it was originally. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with each of these elasticities and show how they matter. All right. May I go on? Who's in the dark? Charlotte, is that you in the dark with glasses on? Got it. Okay. All right. Moving to figure 12. Okay. Now, figure 12 has the same thing as figure 11 on the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side, we've got the money market situation. Now, where does the interest elasticity of money demand show up on this graph on the left-hand side? Where is the interest elasticity of money demand? Chester, you're the next one up, so you get to answer.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yep. Where is the interest elasticity of money demand on this graph? I sort of answered the question already. It has to do with the money demand curve, right? So where is the elasticity on the graph?
Is it where the 2 points meet?
It is not. Taya, how about you? What do you think? Interest elasticity, money demand, where is it?
Is it shown in the slope of the M?
Say it again.
The slope of the MD curve.
Correct. It is part of the slope of the money demand curve. Okay, just like if you think about the price elasticity of demand for pizza, the price elasticity of demand for pizza is reflected in the slope of the pizza demand curve. Okay, everybody got that? I think I have to move Rachel's picture off the screen because I keep getting distracted by the wildlife. Okay, that's a better screen. All right, now we want to ask the question, if we increase the interest elasticity of money demand, what happens on this graph here? What happens to the money demand curve? How do we see an increase in the interest elasticity?
Doesn't it become steeper?
Why? Who's that?
It was me.
Me, oh, Rachel.
Sorry. It would become steeper because the money demand reacts more to an increase or decrease in.
Your reasoning is exactly right, but I think it becomes flatter for that reason. Because say a decrease in the interest rate, instead of causing money demand to go from here to here, an increase in the elasticity is going to cause it to go like out here, right? More elastic, bigger response of money demand, which means I believe that the money demand curve gets flatter, just like the pizza demand curve, a more elastic demand curve is flatter. Does that make sense? This is where somebody hopefully gives me a thumbs up like Bo. Got it. All right. So the interest elasticity of money demand got higher. Let's think this through over here on the LM curve diagram. Starting at point A again, we increase the interest rate by the same amount as before. So we go to B. But now with a higher interest elasticity of money demand, how much does money demand fall compared to the baseline case that we did a few minutes ago? Aspen, any idea? Higher elasticity, same increase in the interest rate. What happens to money demand? How much does it fall? More or less with a higher elasticity?
With a higher elasticity,
Yep.
more.
Exactly. So when we go from A to B now, the interest elasticity, the higher interest elasticity, the greater responsiveness of money demand means that the same increase in interest rate causes money demand to fall further than it did originally. Everything else held constant. How much will GDP have to rise to offset that bigger decrease in money demand? Will this be enough to rise to B prime? Sid? Money demand fell further. How much does GDP have to rise to bring it back up to where it started?
It would have to rise even more.
Correct. So instead of B prime, we're going to end up out here at C, say. Okay, let's look at the next graph. Oh, sorry about that. That's an extra slide that didn't really tell us anything. How about that one? Okay, so with a higher interest elasticity, with a lower interest elasticity of money demand, where we started, the increase in the interest rate to B is offset with an increase in GDP to be prime. But now, with a higher interest elasticity of money demand, at B, the money demand has fallen so much that it takes a bigger increase in GDP to offset that. And that takes us all the way out to point C here. Which means that what happens to the LM curve when you increase the interest elasticity of money demand?
It flattens.
It flattens. Notice the money demand curve gets flatter. The LM curve gets flatter. That's no accident. Does that make sense, Jess? Good. What are you wearing on your wrist? Looks like a lunchbox.
What?
That's not that big. Okay, sorry. It's a scrunchie. I didn't recognize it. I thought it was some cool skydiver's watch or something that would give you altimeter and all that other good stuff. I figured you might be revealing the dark side of you.
No.
All right. Okay, any questions? So the bottom line, increasing the interest elasticity of money demand flattens the money demand curve and flattens the LM curve.
You say that one more time?
Yes, I'm just describing what's happening on the graph. An increase in the interest elasticity of money demand rotates the money demand curve counterclockwise, so money demand is flatter. And it rotates the LM curve clockwise, so the LM curve is flatter. You fact checking me there, Jess? Busted.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm just trying to keep it interesting. Is that chocolate milk you're drinking there, Aspen?
No, it's a smoothie.
Oh, and you're home, huh? That's nice.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Any questions before we take it to the next level? All right. In that case, what's the next level?
Looking at income inelasticity of demand.
Yes,
Or money
except
demand.
that's going to be your next homework assignment.
Oh, okay.
So the next homework assignment is going to be if you return the interest elasticity to what it was originally, but you increase the income elasticity, what is that going to do to the LM curve? And most importantly, why? What is your explanation? Hannah's already excited about the weekend ahead. Where's Lillian today? MIA, huh? I hope you have her contact information. All right, so after this meeting is over, I'll send you guys the assignment just so you'll know for sure, but you know already now. All right. Library status. Looks like they're going to be restricting access to the library. I know that Rachel is going to be terribly upset about not being able to physically go to the library. I get that though. All right. Now, just when you thought macro couldn't be even more exciting, we are going to take it to the next level. Okay, now, the story that I like to tell, it's a parable, it's a heuristic, which means it's a story for teaching purposes, is that GDP is determined in the product market with the income expenditure model and the IS curve. Interest rates are determined in the money market with money supply and money demand and the LM curve. That's a way that in my head, mentally, I keep things straight. However, we know that in the real world, really, it's all simultaneously determined, right? So we have an LM curve, we have an IS curve. To figure out the equilibrium interest rate and level of GDP, we need to put them together. And that's where the next slide comes in. All right, IS and LM, also known as general equilibrium. Okay, since it's Friday, I will inject a little humor in here, at least economic humor. If you don't laugh, that's okay. Excuse me. Once upon a time, I taught intermediate micro, and it was a lot of fun. And the very last thing that we did in intermediate micro was general equilibrium theory, which is really complicated because it asks the basic question: if all firms try to maximize profits and all consumers try to maximize utility and every market is perfectly competitive, is there a set of prices and wages that will put every single market in the economy in equilibrium at the same time? If the answer is yes, we say we're in a general equilibrium. For many, many years, economists just assumed the answer was yes because it seemed so intuitive. It wasn't until 1957 that an economist named Gerard Debreu, who was at Stanford, proved the existence of a general equilibrium. Okay, drawing the graph is really cool. We're not going to do that because that's micro. This is macro. But then one is led to ask the question: in the real world, is every market perfectly competitive? What would you say? Greg, how about you? What would you say, Greg?
Can you repeat the question again?
In the real world, is every market perfectly competitive?
No, I would say no.
That is correct. Has anyone ever proven the existence of general equilibrium, which means a set of prices that puts every market in equilibrium at the same time? Has anyone ever proven the existence of a general equilibrium when at least some markets are not perfectly competitive? The answer is no, it's never been done. Shocking. Fortunately, that's a micro problem, not a macro problem. Okay, in macro, when we talk about general equilibrium, what we're talking about is, can different markets, labor market, product market, money market, can they all be in equilibrium at the same time? Okay, and the answer is yes, they can be. Okay, now, I'm not going to tell you where that equilibrium is. This is usually where Aspen starts to giggle, but I'm not going to say that. I'm not telling you where the general equilibrium is. We're going to have to derive it. And to derive it, we're going to use a new tool. This is really exciting, at least for one of us. Okay, so let me switch my sharing here. Here is a whiteboard. Isn't that awesome? Now, what's annoying is I drew this whole thing yesterday and I saved it, and it is on my computer somewhere, but for the life of me, I can't figure out where it is. So we're gonna have to do it all over again. Okay, now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start at a random point somewhere on the axes. It really doesn't matter where it is. I chose this point right here, A, which is right here on the IS curve. Okay, but you got to trust me, you could do this at any other point. Okay, now let's think about point A. At point A, we are on the IS curve. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us about EP and Y, for example?
That y is equal to EP at that point?
Correct. Y equals EP on the curve. That's great. Somebody is paying attention anyway. Kidding. I know you're paying attention. At least half of you are. Okay, so that's the good news. At A, Y equals EP, and the product market is in equilibrium. Yay us. What about the money market? What can we say about that? Are we on the LM curve?
No, we're above it.
We are above the LM curve, which means money
is
supply
greater
does
than
not
demand.
equal money demand. We're out of equilibrium in financial markets. So what is the situation in financial markets at point A? Quinn, were you going to answer that? Or was
Money
that?
supply is greater than money demand.
Okay, is that true? Let's test it. If we're here and we go up here, higher interest rate, lower money demand, money supply is greater than money demanded. Okay, so above the LM curve, like at point A, money supply is greater than money demanded. Let me just write that down. Money supply greater than money demand. Okay, everybody with me? If you have a question, stop me before I get too far. Okay, now, here's the cool part. This is a question for Sable. Sable, money supply is greater than money demand at point A. What happens to the interest rate when money supply is greater than money demanded?
Interest rate has to so if money supply is greater than money demand.
Yep.
Uh
Notice that what you could do here is go to the left-hand quadrant that I don't have and literally look at a situation where money supply is less than money demanded. You could do that. Okay, I don't have that on this graph.
well interest what was the question again?
The question is, if money supply is greater than money demand, do interest rates stay where they are or do they change?
They I believe the interest rate isn't affected. The
Oh, it's
GDP
affected.
is. Oh,
It's affected. Hannah, you're smiling. Which way do interest rates go?
I was going to say they would have to go back down.
Correct. Right? There's an excess supply of money, and so the price should fall. So what that means is even if we start at point A here, we're not going to stay there. Rather, see if I can get this right. Rather, we're going to, and let me change the color to this. Let's see if this is going to work. The interest rate is going to start falling. Everybody see that? So the good news is we're moving closer to the LM curve. We're moving back to equilibrium in the LM, in the money market. What's the bad news? Hannah?
We're moving off the IS curve.
Correct. So now we're under the IS curve. If we're under the IS curve, what's the relationship between Y and EP? Notice lower interest rates, higher EP than it was before, right? Lower interest rates, higher EP. So I think it's true that where we are now, let me just see if I can put this in. I think it's true that EP is greater than Y.
Yay.
Okay, does everybody see that? As we fall from A, lower interest rates increase autonomous expenditure and shift the EP line up. And so now we have a situation where EP is greater than Y. Okay, passing the baton to Matthew with two M's. Matthew, if EP is greater than Y, Does GDP stay where it is?
No.
What's happening to business inventories here? Customers are buying at a faster rate than businesses are producing. So inventories have to.
It would have to go up to keep it towards equilibrium because people are buying more and their inventory would be depleted.
Okay, inventory is going to fall,
Mm-hmm.
and businesses are going to respond by producing more and hiring more workers. So GDP has to rise at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now at this point we actually, nope, sorry, go away. Didn't want that. At this point, we have two things going on. First, interest rates are still falling, but also GDP is going to rise. Oops, sorry. Did I just knock us out of the whiteboard? Or can you still see the whiteboard?
We can still see it, or at least I
Okay.
can.
Still see it.
Okay, good, because I can't. All right, there we go. There it goes. Okay. So everybody see that? We started at A, the interest rate started to fall. And then when the interest rate fell, that stimulated GDP. And so GDP is rising as interest rates are continuing to fall. And this process continues. Maybe I can even stretch it out. Look at that. Until, bam, we hit the LM curve. Yay! The money market is in equilibrium. Aren't we excited? Jess, aren't you excited? You following? Good. Okay. Now, because we're back on the LM curve, what's true about money supply and money demand?
They're equal.
They are equal. So what happens to interest rates?
It stopped falling.
They don't fall. They're happy. Interest rates stop falling. So what happens to our direction here? We stop going south. But because we're still under the LM curve, it's still the case that EP is greater than Y. It's still the case that GDP has to grow. So now, let's see, can I start over? Now we're going to be headed, oopsie, wanted to start over. Let's try this, and then we'll try that. So now we started heading this way in the direction of the IS curve. All right. Any questions? But wait. Ankitha, we're off the LM curve now, right? Excuse me. We're now under the LM curve. Since we're under the LM curve, what's the relationship between money supply and money demand?
Money supply is less than money demand.
Correct. Hey, Kat, could you? Money supply is less than money demand. Let me write that in here. So when money supply is less than money demand, what happens to the interest rates?
Interest rates would have to go back up.
Interest rates are going to start to rise, which means that now we're not going east anymore. Instead, we're going to be heading to the northeast. really soon thereafter, we bump into the IS curve, which is good because that means y equals EP again. But let's suppose we have enough forward momentum to push us over here. That's quite possible. Wow, I just cannot shake this. Now we're at this point, which is below the LM curve, meaning interest rates are still going to rise, but it's above the IS curve, which means that GDP is going to do what?
Fall.
Gonna
It's
fall.
going to fall. So what that means is we do a hard left turn. And we start moving this away. We cross the LM curve, and once we do that, what happens to interest rates? We're now back
fall.
above the LM curve.
So interest rates want to
Yeah.
fall.
Interest rates want to fall. Now we can take this process out as long as we want it to. Where are we going to end up? Rachel?
At equilibrium,
I don't know what that means. Where is that on the graph?
at the point where the IS curve crosses with the LM curve.
Exactly. Exactly. So no matter where you start on here, the forces in this macroeconomy, in both the product market and the money market, they're going to push us through a series of cycles until we finally end up where the two curves cross. And when and when they do, because we're on the LM curve, money supply equals money demanded, and because we're on the IS curve, Y equals EP, so everything stops at that point. Any questions? So to really understand this, you need to understand how being off one of the curves causes disequilibrium, and then how the economy adjusts to that disequilibrium, right? I could see on the final exam giving you a problem like this and picking some random spot like here and saying, okay, describe the process by which you get back to equilibrium. So you really need to understand this. All right, any questions?
So for the LM curve, if we're above it, it leads to a decrease in interest, and if we're below it, it leads to an increase in interest.
I think that's right.
And so for the IS curve, if we're above it, does that lead to an increase in GDP? I'm trying to think of like
I think it's the other way. I think it's a decrease in GDP, because if you go here, remember, we're above it. So compared to this point right here, higher interest rates, lower EP. So at this point, Y is greater than EP. That's a recessionary gap, and that's going to cause GDP to fall.
Gotcha.
Okay. Again, I wouldn't, the best way to do this is not to memorize the cases. It's to understand the situation so that you can, replicate it as needed. Maybe on the final, I'll put this in some other country or something like that.
Australia?
Australia?
I have a question.
Yeah. What's that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So on the fourth arrow, I guess, how does yeah, that one. How does the
Mhm.
interest rate and the GDP both increase when on the second half of it, it's like above the IS curve?
Yeah. Okay, to get to that point, I was just trying to speed up the process.
Oh,
You're
okay.
right. You're right. It probably stops here
Okay.
unless there is some inertia built in, and it's possible to build a model with inertia. So really what happens here is it goes straight up and then it
Yeah.
continues that way and so forth. So you're strictly speaking correct.
Okay. All right.
Good question. All right. Any other questions or can we go on? Hearing none, let's move back to the other PowerPoint. All right, let me stop sharing this. Tree hugger, who's the tree hugger? Oh, Sable, good job. I approve.
Thank you.
All right, no, that's not it. That's my notes. Where did the PowerPoint go? Oh, how about this? Do I have to cancel this and then try again? I think I do. And there it is. Okay. We should be back to figure 15 again. Do you guys see that? Jess, figure 15, general equilibrium. All right. Now we have just enough time to set up the next part of the story. So let's go to number 16. All right. Here's the question. Well, we'll start here. Here's the question. Okay. We're here at this intersection point at where IS and LM cross. Call this Y0. So we know that at Y0, the money market is in equilibrium and the product market is in equilibrium. They're both in equilibrium. That's good. What does this say about the labor market? Let me ask it differently. Assuming that the money market and the product market are in equilibrium, can we also conclude that we're at full employment? So that the labor market is in equilibrium also?
I'm going to say no.
It would be nice if the answer were yes. And in fact, prior to the 1930s and the Great Depression, economists thought the answer was yes. We now know that was wrong. So in figure 16, what you can see is here's a situation where the equilibrium level of GDP is actually below our potential GDP, which means that there's some unemployment gap here. It means we have a problem. Much like the next time they report the GDP statistics, I might add. Life has gotten a lot more interesting. Okay. Fortunately, Jack has a fallback position. It's the professional rugby circuit. Yeah, I heard that. That's good. Okay. So here we are. GDP is too low. What in the heck do we do now?
I know. Hi, this is Kathy.
So do you understand the problem here?
Oh my goodness, Aunt Elle, I'm so glad to hear your voice. Holy smokes.
Do you understand? Do we understand the problem?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. So one thing that we could do is we could just say, well, the market will provide. In the long run, I'm sure we'll get to unemployment, or to get to full employment. But at least since the Great Depression, that's not been the approach that most governments are willing to take. Rather, we know that we can at least potentially apply monetary or fiscal policy to stimulate the economy and try to fill the GDP gap and restore full employment. And so that's what we're going to be talking about on Monday. All right. Any questions? Thank you for your forbearance. Have a good weekend. Get the homework done.
Professor Greenlaw, when do you want the second assignment turned in?
That's a great question. When do you guys want to do it? I was thinking Wednesday. It's not hard. I mean, it's very similar to the first assignment, but I'm flexible.
What was Wednesday?
Is Wednesday okay?
Yeah, I think Wednesday's fine.
Okay, good. Excellent. Well, then we'll let it be Wednesday.
I have a question about the groups.
Yes.
I know you sent me an email, so what's my group?
Your group is Mark Dye is your partner.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Sure. Anybody else?
Do you know who Aaron is with? Because I know he has work right now.
No, I put Aaron in another group because there was somebody that needed a partner.
Oh, that would be me.
Yes.
Okay, I would just need like know.
Yep. Other questions?
I had a question.
Yeah, Matthew.
So for this next assignment, and I guess for any other assignments coming up in the future, for the part where we have to show it graphically, how do you want us to do that? Do you want us to just draw it out and send a picture with the email?
Yeah, that's
or do you want us
fine.
to-
Do it however you want to do it.
Okay.
Okay, as long as I can read it. If anybody's really good with computer graphics, I will be impressed. Feel free to do that, but if you're not, you can just draw it on paper like me.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, well, have a great weekend. See you Monday.